Now, I don't know if you knew this, but this story was actually written later in Akutagawa's career. It kind of moved from morals and personal and fables to this more psychological and, well, I don't want to say dread because a lot of the stories had dread, but more supernatural.
It definitely seemed to have a lot of different avenues. I'm really excited to discuss this one today because at times, I'll be honest, I felt a little bit lost. And I felt like there were I was like, oh, okay, I get that. And oh, there's some symbolism there. And I was able to take away some of the themes and some of the analytical aspects of this story. But he's such a complex writer, and he's obviously a genius and much smarter than I am. So my elementary brain struggled to grasp some of the concepts. So let's get into it.
Yeah, I mean, don't beat yourself up over literature, right? Like, let it wash over you, enjoy what you can, right? For anyone out there that might have similar feelings is what I would say. And, maybe some of that dread, that uneasiness is intentional, right? Like your boy, Yukio Mishima, is quoted as saying that Akutagawa did, quote, modern scene of hell. Boku lives in a life more hellish than hell, end quote, with this story. So, this story is designed to make you feel uneasy and, just to jump straight into it, right? Like we start off, we're in a taxi sharing it. We hear the story about the raincoat and I'm sitting here thinking of like It from Stephen King. And, the electric lights are haunting us only to like suddenly get, the hook, right? We see the spinning gears like that are translucent and clouding our vision. So maybe let's start anchoring this a little bit, because particularly the first part's I think it's the strongest of all six even. But the first part here is frequently compared, well, the whole thing is kind of compared to The Pit and the Pendulum by Edgar Allan Poe. Because you have these ideas of torture, of justice, of sin, of fear, of punishment, as well as modernization and saviorism. You've got all that going on in this story. And what is a spinning gear but fate? Pushing you forward with no control on a set track, right? And you're going to start to see those tones permeate throughout this whole piece.
And I think Raincoat does a great job of setting the tone, setting the stage for this, because I, as somebody, and I know that you don't believe this, Una, but I do like a schedule, and to have that anxiety of being late, and this guy's just very casual about it, right? Of the narrator's just like, yeah, I'm going to miss the train, so I'll take the next one. Like, like my, I don't know, OCD to be on time. Just like, I'm the guy that gets to the movies 30 minutes early to make sure I don't miss the 20-minute movie. Like, that set me on this path of unease for the rest of the story. And it really did kind of get me going. And I guess that's a good thing, because I felt like I was in hell part of this story.
Right. Well, I mean, think about it. When he's at I think when he gets to the reception, he has the plate with the maggots on it. And he's like, well, it could be an earthworm, right? And then we go through that whole coat rack versus person and the Keelan versus unicorn. You have this duality of things. And the maggots on his plate don't unsettle him, which unsettled me reading it, because you think that is just disgusting. But it goes back to, okay, we're going to start bringing in this concept of death, of this idea of duality even. It might even give you a little bit of Borgesian feel, when things can have two existences across multiple universes, the way one culture calls it a Keelan and the other culture calls it a unicorn, and the other country actually probably doesn't call it a Keelan. I don't know how it's pronounced, but that's how it's pronounced for this video.
Do you feel that, again, this could be a little bit autobiographical, and that Akutagawa knew his own fate and he's kind of accepting of it? Because I feel like the narrator is accepting of it, of being just like, yep, there's some maggots, I'm cool with that, because most people wouldn't accept that.
Well, we haven't mentioned that this was, I don't know if it is it's very close, if not but I think it might be the last story he penned before he ended himself.
Yeah.
Which is why the ending paragraph is so haunting, which is why I think you see so many echoes of Akutagawa through Dazai's writing and such. And the way that, here at the ending of Raincoats, you hear him hear oraitu and oraito, and you see him starting to write all right in Japanese. And you learn about how these electric lights were oppressing him at the reception as he was walking around at the train station. And then again, he's like kind of trying to avoid these electric lights in the lobby. There's like a green lampshade that he feels he needs to avoid, as these colors tend to keep reappearing, the green, the yellow, and the black and white throughout the story. But it all leads towards death, right? He finds out that his brother-in-law's been hit by this train, and he was wearing a raincoat. And it's got, remember when we did The Signal Man by Charles Dickens?
Oh, yeah.
It's that, could you read the signs of the universe? Is the universe a spinning cogwheel of fate where it doesn't matter what you do? There is no free will. We're all heading towards this particular one. And does this narrator know that his is death?
I think he does know. I think that's why he's accepting of it and he's fine with it. And I threw a little green in the background there because I knew you were going to bring up the colors. They're just too prominent. I did have a little bit of difficulty dissecting those, but I feel like that prominence of the electric, life, because life is electric and those electric impulses in our body, and what happens in death is all of that ends.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I believe, you can't quote me on this. You shouldn't quote me on anything, but I believe it was his wife that had written that he started to believe later in life that his life was no longer under his control. Like he started to think that there were greater forces pushing him forward. And you see the way that he almost struggles with this supernatural force, particularly in the second part, right? With the rat that was carrying the slipper and then suddenly the rat's not there. And you're like, okay, that's the age-old question. How do I detect an undetectable invisible force? You know what I mean? If there truly is this supernatural thing pushing life down a certain path, he's got kind of like a little bit of the La Orla Maupassant feeling. And I know I'm referencing, Poe and Maupassant and a lot of different things with Dickens, but, even in this part, like the fifth part of the story too, there's a ton of literary references. Like he really pushes the reader and is not very forgiving. Like he just throws references out left and right to other literature.
And the second part of Vengeance was one that I felt like I honed in on the most because it's one of those, as an individual, when you start to question your own sanity and you might think to yourself, I am sane. What is going on? I think for many people, a logical jump or conclusion is this has to be supernatural. There's nothing wrong with me. There has to be something else out there beyond just the norm, the mundane. And it can easily allow you, I think, to convince yourself of that because you're just searching for answers. You just need something to rationalize. You just need something to anchor yourself down because you know in your own mind that you aren't broken. And maybe it's hard to accept when you are broken.
Oh, 100%. No, I think you're absolutely on the right path because I don't know if we've ever talked about it, but there are studies out there that says humans are predisposed to believe more likely in a supernatural solution, right? Because I think of maybe some of those psychological draws of externalizing some problems, right? Because you saw in the story, he was so worried about sin. And these people, when he's walking around Ginza, which I think it was Ginza, it's a very rich part of town. It's very expensive shopping over there, indulgence, right? And he's wondering about, are these people aware of sin? And they bring in some references at the end of part 2 of Vengeance with the Hades and with the Furies chasing him. And we've talked about Furies in some other talks of ours too, which were the Greek, I can't remember exactly what they were, but they came after you if you did something wrong, like a way of punishment.
Greek literature.
Yeah, it was in the Greek stuff.
Yeah.
But it, we culminate in the night where, just like Akutagawa in real life had problems sleeping. He got addicted to sleeping pills. That's actually, I think that might be what did him in the end, was an OD on that. But you see how he even talks about when he's talking to his writer friend that he's just like, yeah, I'm getting along with medicine, right? And he's having a hard time sleeping and he's trying to finish his stories. Another reason why the story is so famous is the main character is like this thinly veiled replica. Like if we're talking about the Borgesian multiple experiences, right? He talks about how he wrote the short story Hellscream, which we've covered on this channel, and some of the poem collections that he wrote, Akutagawa himself. And in the English translation, it's Mr. A. I think it was Boku, maybe in the Japanese, which just means like I. But it's a thinly veiled approach of, yeah, this is kind of some type of a fuzzy mirror rendition of Akutagawa himself as the main character.
I got the impression that it very much felt like death itself. It it had this feel of gauntness. And I think that, as you're struggling with life and you're struggling with acceptance and maybe having some, mental breakdowns, and then you're not sleeping on top of it. And if you're taking, some type of medication to sleep, I don't think you're probably getting good sleep. Again, I'm not a doctor or anything, but, having to have an artificial sleep is probably not going to be good as natural sleep. And that in itself is going to start affecting you mentally, and you're not going to be able to function, cognitively as well. And that, again, that gear that's spinning is not going to line up correctly, and your life is just going to be off the rest of, every aspect of the rest of your life is going to be off.
Oh, 100%. And the author himself, I can't remember if it was before or during when he was taking a lot of the drugs, but there's talk where he would stay up 2 days in a row because he couldn't sleep, and he'd just zonk out for a day and then repeat that process, right? Like, it was a very strange sleeping behavior.
Yeah. Very
I don't think it is. Yeah, and I'm not a doctor either, but I know that that's not a good way to live. And he started to have actual hallucinations and such. So
exactly.
How much of this is literature and how much of this is him reflecting some form of what he's experiencing with the sleeping? He lost his brother-in-law, just like the character did in the story. His mom was also in a psychiatric ward. I think since he was like a real young boy, I think like 2 years old or something like that. Like, it's something he was always worried about, his mental deterioration. And now he's like, I think it's happening. I'm going to end up like my mother. And rather than live like this, to all this talk that we've had, I feel death is coming for me. I feel there's warning signs about fate that this is happening. And that's why you see like the yellow taxis, the Book of Yellow from Strindberg that he tries to avoid, or the green lamp that he's trying to avoid, or this green book on religion in the room. These colors are all warnings for him that lead to this black and white, right? Like in terms of that gnarled black tree, and we see black and white through it. The funeral colors, we're all heading towards death like a fate wheel. And he sees, and he's reading the signs is that he's like, this is what's going to happen to me. And that's what's haunting.
Yeah. And I think that it's terrifying. He is powerless, and this could even be one of the greatest glimpses into the human subconscious, because it is theoretical. Again, I'm totally throwing this out there, crazy idea. What if some of this story is him sleep writing? Like, he's gone through sleep deprivation for 2 days and then sits down and is writing this, or zonks out for a day and wakes up in this kind of delirium. You know how, like, if you sleep too much, you're super groggy, and he's getting up and writing this. I mean, this is so close to home. It just feels so real to me, and it's heartbreaking in the end too.
Well, you kind of get a little bit of that dreamy, nightmarish like atmosphere in the part 5, the red lights, right? Because you have the red light filling the room. We finally do have somewhat of a dream, and he's just like gonna wake up and I'm just gonna go see this pious old man who offers me an apple, right? And on that apple, we have the unicorn, the horned creature, right? So again, in terms of his Christian myths, I'm not as good at picking out a lot of the more Buddhism and such, but you see the way he infuses the way that death is coming for him, that sin is coming for him, right? If we think of the apple and the fall from the Garden of Eden, and the serpent being the representation of Satan, right? Like the horns from the unicorn here. We have a lot of like almost, it's like meeting the devil, because in his mind, which is, out there, he thought he borrowed Crime and Punishment. And you and I have read The Brothers Karamazov, of course. And there's reference to Ivan. If you remember, there's that very famous chapter in Brothers Karamazov where Ivan meets the devil and you're not sure if it's reality or not, right?
Yeah.
And that's what this man's going through, is he's like, I'm losing my mind and I don't know what's real or not anymore. And what does reality see him as? Like, if we view his wife as someone that should stabilize him, or society, like in the 6th part, she's like, I had this vision that you were dead, right? Like, even she is starting to almost see the signs, which makes it even freakier, considering this is like right before the end for the author himself.
It is very eerie. And I think a lot of the clues, and again, I didn't pick up on them well, but I did see them. And I think that if you looked really deep and you plotted it out through the whole story and all the parts, I think the colors are what it comes down to. And that those were the signs of his mental deterioration. And those were the signs, those were the cries for help. And I think that those had meaning to it. And I don't know if green is for life, vibrant, grass, green, nature, and blood. Is red, we have blood. And those were kind of playing off of each other, of life and death here throughout the story. And I also thought, as we get to the end, has he been dead all along? Has he been ghosting through this story, and it's a remembrance of his life? Because that is one way that you could think of, when you get to the end of your life, and of course, nobody really truly knows, but there is the idea that your whole life flashes before your eyes. Is this his whole life, and he has been dead the whole time? I don't know. It's very eerie. It's very supernatural. It's very sad, especially when we get to the end here.
Yeah, like a memory recall episode. Everybody's going to read it, come with their own conclusions. For me, when I look at the colors, the yellows were warning in terms of the taxi and like that yellow book, which I think what was it? He read, I think it was Inferno by Estrenberg. And when he did, I think again, don't quote me, I think his wife said that's when he started to believe in the supernatural, right? It was at that moment that he knew that the writer himself had a turn in his life. And like the green, like he's avoiding the green lights, like it gives him a headache. The green army American lady, like he was arguing. He said he looked out to the forest. He didn't call the forest green, but I know what color a forest is. And he said that's where his stories went to die, right? So in some ways, I haven't had you read Kappa yet, which is his magnum opus, okay? And that's one of those stories where, what are monsters? And sometimes we realize monsters are life, and life is suffering in some regards. And for some people like Akutagawa, it's much worse than perhaps someone who I feel like I have a pretty good life. I'm generally pretty satisfied, but maybe that's my lower intellect that I get satisfied a lot easier. I don't know.
Oh man, you're speaking to my pessimism so much. You're hitting me in the heart. I love it. I think at the end though, the last part, it really hit home when they basically just say he's an idiot. He has schizophrenia. I mean, it's called out right there, blatant, and you're just like, oh, like why didn't you help the guy then? And again, I know mental health anguish and mental health issues was a lot different, 90 years ago than it is today, and in some regards, I mean, I think there's a lot more help nowadays, but in many regards, it's kind of the same. Of some people are just looked at as hopeless and throw medication at them and hope for the best and let them, ruin their own lives as long as it doesn't affect me. And it just comes back to be very heartbreaking. But I think this is a fantastic story, and I think that it feels so real to me.
And I think that's what a lot of people feel is when they read this, they react to it. And perhaps that's way better than any form of symbolism that we could talk about or give guidance to. This is how we interpret and enjoy literature, right? And this is one of those stories that I think doesn't have to go down a particular Cogwheels path if it must be interpreted this way. You can react to it. And these are just the ways that have pulled, I think, our strings, that I think this is a powerful story, and I can see clearly why it's one of Akutagawa's most, famous recommended stories. But that's because we got to get you some Kappa in your brain coming up soon.
All right, sign me up.
All right, guys, my name's Ben Una. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. What did you think about this piece? What was some of your favorite or most haunting moments in it? Let us know in the comments down below. Peace.
Peace.